This year, one of the things I got for Christmas was a handy-dandy book on every single Pokemon ever created. So, of course, upon receiving this, I decided I had to do something Pokemon-related on this channel. And what better to do on here than turn Pokemon into one of my favorite things of all time, superheroes. I'm Christian Pearson of PopCross Studios, and let's dive right in. Pikachu is the obvious character to start with because, Pikachu's the face of Pokemon. Had to do a Pikachu superhero. And even though Pikachu's main thing is electricity, I kinda leaned into the speed and agility side of the character more. I mean, maybe that's just because I really wanted to draw a Flash-like superhero. I really like super speed. It's probably the superpower I would want if I could have a superpower. And of course, whenever the Flash is running, he always has those streaks of electricity coming off of him, so I figured I could get agility and lightning in on this one character if I did a Flash-type superhero for Pikachu. I didn't know how to work in the cheeks without giving the character a bit of blush, which I do give this character a bit of a blush to her cheeks anyway, but I kinda like the idea of taking Pikachu's round, red cheeks and turning them into round red goggles. And I figured a Flash-type character would probably want to wear goggles. I mean, the Flash doesn't, but if you're running at speeds that high, if you don't have indestructible eyeballs, then you probably want something to keep dust and debris from flying into your eyes as you're bolting down the street. I also figured I had to make the character really happy and smiley and kinda cute looking. I thought the pigtails were a nice touch both for making the character cute and because they kinda look like Pikachu's ears. Because I was doing a whole bunch of these, I did lighter rendering than I've been doing in my last few pieces, but I think I actually like these a lot better than some of the more detailed work I've been doing lately. Anyway, here's our Pikachu superhero. Next up, we got Deoxys, and the reason I actually decided to do this character is because immediately when I looked at him, I thought dreadlocks. Like those arms, they kind of just reminded me of dreadlocks, so I really wanted to do some kind of psychic space character with dreadlocks. The images in my head, I was kind of channeling a Doctor Strange meets Green Lantern. Maybe that's because Deoxys is from space. That's why I was thinking Green Lantern. But the character ended up looking a bit more Iron Man-like, although I have another much more specifically Iron Man-inspired character coming up. You can see I also took those things on the side of Deoxys' head and tilted them up a bit, which ended up making them look kinda like bear ears, which wasn't my intention, but I don't really mind how it turned out. I also gave her that sort of hand pose that you see Doctor Strange doing a lot and some other psychic characters. And as I do with all of these, I just color pick the colors straight off of the Pokemon reference image. I probably shouldn't admit this early in the video, but this is my favorite one of all the Pokemon I transform. I think this one turned out super cool. It's really smooth. I think it looks the most professional of all the ones I end up doing, but, don't leave the video. We still got Charizard and a bunch of other good ones coming up. Anyway, I've been using a textured brush to do the shadowing, but on this character I ended up smoothing out those lines a lot because, it's kind of a metallic-y look, and the metal didn't seem right for it to be that rough. So here's our final Deoxys Super Psychic. Now, this is probably the main event for a lot of people, Charizard. And I actually did a different Charizard first. The very first piece I'd done was a Charizard as sort of a knight with a giant flaming sword and a cape, and it just didn't really work that well for me. Partially the rendering, and partially I just didn't think he was cool enough. And when I look at Charizard, I think he's the cool guy Pokemon, the original cool guy Pokemon. He was always my favorite when I was younger. I think he was a lot of people's favorites, especially in Gen 1. And I just kind of had to think of, okay, well, who is a cool, original superhero? And of course, the first thing to pop into my head was Iron Man. He's like the cool guy of the Avengers. He's the character that launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2008, and then I just got stuck on the idea of doing Charizard as Iron Man. And of course, I had to make him flying and fire type, so I made him kicking off the ground with some fire. I didn't put the repulsor cannons in his hand like Iron Man has. I didn't want to make him too similar to Iron Man. I also kept his face exposed, a little Batman looking. And I liked having the fire coming out of hand cannons on the back of his hand. And you can see on the back of his forearms, I also gave him those Mega Charizard inspired kind of forearm frills, or whatever they'd be called, as a reference to Charizard's wings. I also took out a bunch of the rough lines that I'd done in the shading stage, made the character a bit smoother like Deoxys, and then I added a whole bunch of glow to him. Lots of rim lighting and lots of shininess, you know? And added a bit of a lightness to the fire as well, and this is what the final product turned out to be. Next, we've got Terrakion. Don't know if I'm saying that right. Admittedly, I didn't know who he was before getting this book and doing this video. I was just flipping through the book and saw him, and I was like, oh, he is super cool looking and could very easily be transferred into a Hulk or the Rhino sort of character, and he was probably the easiest one to do. I just went to town right away. The first thing I thought of ended up working really well, and if not Deoxys, then this one is probably my favorite of the set. Although, admittedly, I'm pretty happy with how all of these turned out. But in looking at this, if you're familiar with the Rhino, you can definitely see the inspiration I took from that Spider-Man villain. And if you've been following this channel since I posted my first animated video on here in September, then you know I'm a big fan of the Rhino, that video being the one on the really weird comic book history of the character. Anyway, the reason I started talking about that is because there's not too much else to say about this one. I just really like how it turned out. I think he's super cool looking. I guess he does kind of look a little bit more like a villain than a hero, but you know, he could be a Hulk-like hero who, you know, is sort of a hero but also does a lot of bad stuff. I mean, that's not really Hulk's fault. This guy, I kind of picture him doing bad stuff on purpose. Like, he's a bit of a rebel, maybe an anti-hero kind of guy. But anyway, here's the final product. Articuno, I immediately thought of Frozen, and then was like, let's not lean Frozen so much, let's go a bit more Storm from the X-Men. And I mean, you can see inspiration of both of those characters in this one. And I kind of pictured Articuno as being, you know, thinner, more elegant, kind of ballerina-esque. So I leaned more into the beauty side of the character and less into the, you know, speed of the Pikachu or the coolness of Charizard. Made her kind of look like a bit of a model. You'll also see when I get closer to the end, I do different rendering on this one. Actually, you can see it here. I used the same kind of rough lines for the outline of the character. I actually did this one before all of the others and then changed up my rendering style after her, so her outlines are going to be a bit rougher, and I don't think that really works for these. I like it a lot better when I switch over to the cleaner outlines. I do smooth this one out a little bit more for the final reveal shot. But besides that, I think this one turned out pretty well. I do wish I'd inked it differently at the start, but it is still pretty cool looking, if I do say so myself. I probably could have made her shooting out an actual ice beam as opposed to just having that ice ball thing in her hand, but oh well, I learned as I went along, and this is probably my least favorite of the batch, but it's still not too bad. Kind of fun looking. And here is our final product of this one. Now with Greninja, this one was admittedly a little bit too easy once I got the pose figured out. Because, you know, looking at the character, Greninja is already kinda human-shaped. I mean, obviously not human-shaped, but kinda humanoid-looking, so I pretty much just had to give the character a little bit more human-like proportions, and then I just kind of leaned into the ninja side of the character, which is the obvious choice, but I still think this one's pretty cool looking. I was thinking something like Ronin, who, not Ronin the Accuser, but Ronin who Hawkeye is probably gonna be in Avengers Endgame. Kind of a, you know, ninja superhero. I didn't really think too much about the personality of this character. I don't actually know the Pokemon Greninja that well, besides from Super Smash Bros. But I think my favorite part of this ends up being the throwing the water disc things, which I mess around with them a lot at the end, but I think that turned out pretty cool and gives this character a lot more movement than some of the other ones. Actually, you know what? This one actually also kind of reminds me of the ninja character from Young Justice with the cat mask. Somebody remind me who it is in the comments. I'm not looking it up right now. But if you know who I'm talking about, then you know who I'm talking about. Young Justice ninja character. Cheshire, is that it? I think it's Cheshire. Anyway, remind me in the comments if I'm wrong. Also, you can see I kind of turned the tongue into just a regular scarf. That is a tongue around Greninja's neck, right? Because it's a frog? I don't know. Sorry, don't know Greninja that well. Anyway, here's the end product. You know what? This has gone so well, I think I have to do at least one more. But instead of picking one myself, I'm gonna flip through the book, randomly stop on a page, and choose a Pokemon from that page. Let's do this. Wow. What the heck is that thing? I guess we're turning Guzzlord into a superhero. Let's do this. I gotta admit, this is probably the weirdest Pokemon I've ever seen in my life. I had never seen him before that moment that you just witnessed. And you know what, I'm kinda glad I got a weird one. I mean, a weird one is better than a boring one, right? And with this guy, I actually found it was pretty easy to think of some inspiration. At first I thought of Kingpin, because he's a big, kinda chunky dude, and in his description it said he had something to do with being a glutton demon or something. So I was thinking, you know, big chunky Kingpin kind of guy. But then as I started drawing, I was like, oh, no, wait, Venom. He's got that mouth on his stomach that Venom kind of has in one of the Marvel vs. Capcom games. And then I just leaned into that. I took away those two claws coming out of his stomach in the actual Pokemon and just gave him one tongue claw coming out of his stomach thing. I also started thinking a little bit more along the lines of Ghost Rider. Not really sure where that inspiration came from, but you can see I gave him that skull kind of thing that Ghost Rider might have. And because he has a mouth on his stomach, I figured he didn't need one on his face. I mean, you don't really need two mouths, right? I mean, you need one, but do you really need a second? I don't think so. Did a little bit of research into this guy, and he's an Ultra Beast from another dimension, which I thought was pretty sweet. I probably could have put a bit of Doctor Strange or one of his villains into this guy, but I didn't really think about that until after the fact. But anyway, this is what we ended up with. Fun, kinda creepy one to end on. That's all for this bonus episode, everyone. Subscribe to see a new video every Monday, and then some random extra episodes like this thrown in every few weeks. And don't forget to join the PopCross community Facebook group or Discord so you can submit stuff that could potentially end up in an episode on this channel. Alright, I'll see y'all next week.